Welcome to Learning Leaders Spotlight, where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. I'm your guest host, Tracy D. Lufkin, and I'm a relationship manager with Training Pros, the sponsor of this podcast. Training Pros is a learning and development contract staffing company. We like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us help you find the best consultant to start your project with confidence. My guest today is award-winning L&D leader who recently won the Icon Award from On Conferences. Introducing John Jordan, the Learning and Development Manager from Sendero. Welcome, John.
Howdy from Texas.
That's right. Are you in Dallas area?
I am. I'm in the Dallas area. Yes.
Good. Good. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you here today. And I would love if you could share with our audience a 60-second overview of what you do.
Sure. Absolutely. So I am the L&D manager at my consulting firm, Sendero Consulting, and I get the pleasure of leading a fantastic team of learning professionals as we seek to unleash the potential of our consultants. As you probably know, consulting is a very challenging job. There's a lot of change, there's a lot of navigating ambiguity, and there's a lot of learning. And so we get the joy of walking alongside our consultants and equipping them, helping them grow and learn. And so I love bringing all of the experience that I've been given from working globally and bring it to our diverse companies so that they can be empowered to help our clients win and help them feel like they're the hero of the story. And yeah, so that's what I do, and that's the joy that I get out of that.
I love that. The hero of the story. That's fantastic. Also, the change part, of today's world, having more change heroes, right, is key for us. So we appreciate all that you guys do. What about L&D first attracted you to this field?
Sure. So I have a funny background. I started as a learner, like all of us, right? I went from learner to teacher to trainer. And so I started really falling in love with learning when I went to graduate school. And that's where I learned how to research and how to discover primary source data and how to write and how to get kicked in the teeth by my advisor when it comes to editing and footnotes and things like that. And then have to pick up the pieces and start all over, and I learned so much through that, and I became a TA. And so I became a teaching assistant. And as I was doing that, I just found I had a love for the classroom. I love seeing the light bulb come on when people discovered new things. Well, then I went into consulting shortly after that. And as I was in consulting, I found myself getting in training and development projects. And I loved working and collaborating with a client to figure out what their needs were and then writing and helping them deliver whatever they needed for their trainings. And it was just a wonderful experience. And around that time, I got the invitation to go overseas to Budapest, Hungary, where I had lived 2 years before, and to work as a part time university professor and also in the high school classroom. And so I became a teacher. I was in the classroom again, this time leading the classroom, not just as a TA. And so I was apprenticing on the university level, but then in the high school level, I was just leading the classroom and loved it. But my consultant background really missed the challenge of change. I enjoyed being in the classroom. I enjoyed connecting with students. But what I missed, and I'm sure you have some listeners who are teachers, former teachers, or maybe even their teachers looking to go into L&D. Here's what I discovered about that time. Yes, I love being with students. Yes, I love teaching. But the rinse and repeat of being in the classroom, for me, it just became a little stale. It became a little old, and I needed the challenge of teaching new things frequently and trying new things with new challenges. And so I had a friend of mine who was working at the consulting firm that I worked for, where I'm at now, and she reached out and said, "Hey, we need someone to lead our L&D department." And so I came back from Budapest after living there for at that time 4.5 years, and that's how I got back into L&D. And so that's kind of my strange journey from learner, teacher to trainer.
That is so interesting, especially you mentioned global earlier. So Budapest, I mean, wow. And I heard writing in there, and I've seen a lot of your LinkedIn posts. And so you do a lot of writing, and that's one of your loves, isn't it?
It is, and I've been writing. I've been writing since college, just for fun, just as a way to process. And so it's a great way to marry my passion with my profession. And so while overseas, I launched a website and had started a podcast, and so I was writing a lot and just writing for fun. And so then when I got into L&D at my current company, I started writing for them, and then I've had the pleasure of writing for a training magazine as well.
That's wonderful. Yes, I think I've seen a few of your articles in there, so I'll have to take a closer look. So, with your experience and background, especially global background, what are the most impactful changes you've seen in L&D in the last few years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, probably the one that rises to the top is this whole concept of human centered design. And what I mean by that, and I'm sure your listeners are familiar with this and can look it up, is that you're putting the needs and the pain points and the challenges of the learner, of the user at the center of the story. And so doing things like empathy mapping, where you're understanding what are the needs, and then asking a lot of open ended questions and doing not just focus groups, but interviews and active listening, and really wanting to understand what does this end user need in order to actually apply what's being learned. Not just learn it, because they're not just brains on a stick. These are humans, right? And so if it's human-centered design, that means that they have a heart, a soul, they have a mind, like it's all there. And so how do you keep that within the frame of reference when you're designing training? And I've seen that change shift in the past, I would say like 10 years or so. So that within that, the way that that is produced is through more agile methodologies of training. So it's not just, talking to a few stakeholders at the very front end and then going off into, a cave for a while, creating a training and then rolling it out. And sometimes that works, but more agile SAM, successive approximation model, which comes from Allen Interactions. And that idea of, if you think about it like a bicycle, this is how the agile folks talk about it, right? You talk to the end user about the seat and you ask them what questions, ask them the questions you have about what do they need, what do they want, and then you go off and you build the seat and you give it to them and they test it and they say, yeah, this is good. Then you go off and you do the same with different parts of the bike so that by the end, you have something that has been pieced together and you've had successive, you've had iterative interaction with your end user. And so there should be very few surprises at the end. And I love that because it connects the user with the designer and it connects the learner with the teacher more frequently. It's not just the teacher has all the knowledge and goes off and then comes down the mountain and says, here's the information. Here's some walls of words on a PowerPoint. Now go forth and remember these 19 things about leadership training. But it's much more immersive. It's much more understanding of what's the end user's environment. How do they learn and what are their gaps? What are their motivation gaps, not just the skill gaps or knowledge gaps? And so it's much more immersive. And so I think with that, that's kind of the methodology. And what I've seen as some outputs from that change are more what are called micro learnings. So things that are, 3 to 5 minutes long. Those are being sent to the end user. We've done some of that at Sendero, where we create short videos on how to better engage the mentors, how to better engage with their mentees in our company. And it's just a short video that we create very on the fly. And so you think about it like a TikTok video or like a reel or a YouTube video. And that kind of approach going to the user, not just asking them to come to our classroom and sit, not just asking them to come to our LMS and receive, but we are going to them, is human centered, right? And it's quick and easy. It's adjusting to the way that people are learning these days. And obviously, it's one way to do it. It's not the only way, but I've seen that change, and I've seen the positive impact of that. And so that's human centered design. I'd say I'd start there. There's one other thing, but before I get into that, I just want to pause to see if you have any questions or thoughts.
Well, I just love the brain on the stick term that you use because that is very much how learning had been, right? And we've seen it evolve, and it's great to now have these micro learnings, these TikTok learnings, and bringing it to the learner, that human centered design for sure.
Right. Yeah. To be sure. And it's not as if the classroom is completely irrelevant. It's not that we don't learn. It's just that, especially with adult learners, it's not that you don't learn in the classroom. It's that adult learners need more social learning. They need more. How does this manifest in my world? They need to have interactions with others. They need quick hits on the go, on the job training as well. And that's what I like about human centered design is that provides that, and you can pair it with, or you can couple it with the in person classroom training, which is just necessary. I don't think that's going away, but it has to be complemented by other modalities as well.
Agreed. And we're all conditioned to that classroom environment anyhow. So there's a
Sure.
little bit of change there as they learn
Yeah,
differently.
sure. Sure. And I love the classroom. Like I come alive in the classroom. I think it's fantastic. But my expectations of watching the L&D industry change and learning more about centered design and watching even the impact of it, not just at my company, but other companies, has shown me I cannot rely on this one tool in order to see behavioral change. Because that's what we're after, right? In the classroom, a lot of times what you're after is, can you remember this information and can you repeat it on a test? And we hope that you remember it as you go, right? As a former high school and, adjunct professor, that's what I hoped for. But when you get to the professional world and you get into L&D, you're looking for behavioral change. You're looking for motivational change. You're looking for them to apply what they've learned on the front line, right? And so that means that the target has been moved slightly, and how you reach that target has to be so much more than just, here are these walls of words on a PowerPoint. Now memorize these things and you'll be on your way.
Exactly. And your second point?
Yeah, so the second most impactful change I've seen within L&D in the last few years is leadership coaching. And I'm sure your audience knows there are differences in the way that we understand coaching. Most of us, when we hear coaching, we think someone older and wiser telling us what to do, right? And I actually learned this when I was overseas. My wife was getting her ICF, International Coaching Federation certification. And I was watching her go through this and I was experiencing it with her and learning a lot of the stuff with her. And I learned that coaching is not just people telling you what to do, but it's actually being able to unlock the potential of others by asking questions and letting the person being coached come to conclusions so that then they own those conclusions and they put it into action. So I've seen a lot of that. I mean, Harvard Business Review has written a lot on this. There's entire organizations that have built models around leadership coaching. There's been a huge influx of individual contractors who are, executive coaches. And coaching is a Jedi mind trick in some ways. I mean, it's just this amazing skill set that we promote within our company with our management team, especially. But I've seen others use it so well, and the reason why it works so well is once again, it's human centered. It's not about you. It's not just about you. Yes, you have knowledge and expertise. Yes, it's important to pass that on. But is your goal to make little Tracy D's who run around and are completely codependent upon you to make every decision, and they just look like you and they act like you and they have all your knowledge? Not really. I mean, that'll make you feel good. That'll stroke your ego for just a minute. But what happens when you retire, right? What happens when you're not in the room, right? You want them calling you up and saying, "I don't know what to do." No, no, no. You want them to be empowered, right? And that's another shift is folding in the coaching principles of asking questions like the grow model or things like that, where you're teaching people how to think for themselves, how to realize that a lot of what they need to figure out is already up in their head. They just need someone to ask them the questions and process it. And then own the solution. Go out and do it. So now there's confidence that's being built in them. They're learning to rely on their own intuition. They're learning themselves. And the research shows they're much more likely to put into practice what they've discovered themselves rather than you or me just saying, "Hey, go and do this." Now, obviously, I understand, like, especially in consulting, there are times when you have to just tell people, "Hey, go and do this," right? Because it's just gotta get done. But especially in those leadership coaching conversations, that's one big trend I've seen within L&D that I'm so happy about to see more people doing leadership coaching.
Agreed. And I love that Jedi mind trick quote. I'm going to use that for
Not
sure.
that we're trying to trick anybody, it's just, it's that tool, that's kind of uncommon.
Yeah, just that Jedi mindset for sure. So, what challenges and or obstacles are you seeing or facing?
Yeah, that's a great question. The challenges that I see and face as an L&D professional, I would say, one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is how to engage and equip people who are on the management team. Gallup has talked for years and years about how management and management team is the backbone of every company. Um, and as managers get older, it seems to me from my experience, but also just kind of doing some research on this, they've learned a lot. It's not as if you can really teach them a lot of new. You can, but they've learned a lot about what they're doing. The challenge is, how do you get them to want to learn more? And how do you get them to have new discoveries? That's one of the challenges I'm facing. And so I've been doing some research on this, and we apply the kind of the standard 70-20-10 model of learning, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is like 70% of learning comes from experience, 20% of learning comes from social learning, and 10% comes from formal education, right? Well, there's some recent research that I read that said it's actually more like 55, 25, 20. And so, 55 being experience, 55% being experience, 25% being social, and 20% being formal. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that the social learning is actually much more valued. And in fact, those percentages actually go up in social when you look at people who are more experienced. And so for us, the challenge has been, how do we get more social learning? How do we introduce more social learning to our management team so that they're hearing from others, oh, this is how you have crucial conversations. I've been doing it this way all these years. I've never heard that you do it that way. Okay, that makes sense. And then get them to practice that, right, with each other, right? Even if it's embarrassing, even if it's a little cringe or awkward, get them to practice that. And then now they have a framework. They've not just heard about it, right? But they've heard about it from someone they trust. They've heard about how it's been practiced, and then they practiced it themselves. So that's what we're trying to do in terms of engaging the management team. But as you know, management managers are busy, and so getting in their world through, training or sitting them down or micro learnings and all that kind of stuff can be quite the challenge. So that's definitely one way.
That's what I was gonna comment on, is that it is challenging to get to those leaders because they are doing more and more in today's world, and having more and more responsibilities on their plates for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and also, the social learning piece is something that I've learned in our training at our company, the way that I've seen it. So that's kind of I've spoken about it at a macro level, but at our company, the way I've seen it is this: our more junior folks or more junior consultants, they're sponges. They want to learn, and so there's not enough information you can give them. I mean, you can just throw everything at them, and so a lot of our training, especially early on, it's high on content delivery, right? It's very heavy on content delivery. Obviously, we're doing, some diverse training. We have them do case studies and, all kinds of different things to get them engaged, mock projects, stuff like that. But then as we go higher up in the trajectory of someone's career, we've introduced more and more social learning, more and more scenario based learning, practicing what they're learning in the classroom, failing in the classroom, talking to each other, learning from each other. We have seen so much success from that. I mean, we see it in our post course surveys, we see it in our NPS scores. Like, there's so much success in introducing more social learning. So again, not getting rid of classroom learning, we still have that, not getting rid of new content or new knowledge. But again, these are human beings. They're not brains on a stick. How do you pull together the social, the educational, the formal, the experiential? How do you bring all of that together?
Mm, that's a great question. And that leads me into my next question about where do you see the L&D space headed in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, that is a great question. Well, I think first of all, one of the ways where I see it heading is using more creative forms of teaching as a response to the way people are learning in the wider world, right? And so I'll tell you what I mean by that. When you look at the statistics of how and where people are learning, um, it's interesting to see Deloitte published a study in May of 2023 where they talked about the trend of people, fewer and fewer undergraduates going into university. And so the trend was something like 2011, there was like 18 million. And then like 2022 was like 15 million. So there's a drop in like 3 million. And then it's like, which is like a 4% decline, I think. And then um, there's also this college going rate since 2018, according to the Department of Bureau of Labor and Statistics, is dropping. I mean, it's dropping dramatically. And so there's various reasons for that. Some of it's financial, a lot of it is financial. Some of it is people just like to learn on the go now, post pandemic. They've found that they can pick up a trade and things like that. Some of it is they don't like what they're, the ideological battles on university campuses. Who knows? Like, there's a lot of stuff going on there, but what can we observe from that? Well, what we can observe from that is if people are learning on the go and they're wanting to not just sit in a classroom, but they want to also learn experientially with others and they want to learn in different modalities like TikTok, like YouTube, like Reels, then how can L&D learn from that? And so where I see L&D in the coming years, I would love for us not just to kind of be on the back end of this and be on the heels, but like continue to think about how do we diversify our training deliverables by providing things that would be interesting to these users, to these people who clearly are looking for new ways to learn. And so, just to give you an example, the other day on LinkedIn, I posted a poll and I was just curious. I was thinking about this podcast and I was thinking about how people learn. I said, okay, what is the very best way that you learn today? And I'm looking at it right now. Uh, and I had 88% of the people who responded said on the job apprenticeship, hands on. So that's 88%. 6% said social media and podcasts, and another 6% said physical and audiobooks. 0% said the very best way that they learn today is classrooms or with a teacher. And that's tough, right? As a former teacher, I'm like, oh, that burns. And I have friends who are teachers, and so like I know that we've got to adjust, right? It's not that the classroom is going away, like I said at the very beginning. So what does this mean? Well, this means that L&D has to get better at training on the job and meeting people where they're at. So I've heard, L&D learners or L&D leaders in other industries who are like consumer packaged goods, right? Who are in that industry. They're figuring out ways to get on the front line with their learners and observe how are they learning, how are they applying the training that they learned. Um, how can we do more micro learnings? How can we go to our learners with more training? How can we meet them where they're at? More human-centered design, because this is how people are learning. Like I said, like a lot of people are opting out of the classroom. Doesn't mean the classroom's going away. That trend could change. Just because it's a trend doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. But that's where we're at right now. And so what will the impacts be for the next 5 to 10 years? I think we're going to have to adjust the way we train. It can't just be come and sit and absorb this PowerPoint or sit in front of your computer and just absorb this training that's from an LMS, no matter how pretty it is, all that kind of stuff. It's got to be that. And it's got to be meet people where they're at and figure out how are they going to learn and actually apply it. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. And it's also to be that creative and on the job, there's a cost to that, right? There's definitely a cost. So if you had 10 times your budget, where would you spend that?
Yeah. If I had 10 times my budget, I I would hire a creative team and I would even yeah, I would hire a creative team and I would have them working on more micro learnings. I would have them producing more trainings that are quick and on the job, that are easily deployable. I would do more of more interactive training, like where I know there's even companies who they have former actors who can come in and help facilitate scenario based training. I would do more of that because I've just seen so much impact by reaching learners where they're at, but yet it's costly because it takes time and because you've got to produce something that's different. And so we're trying to do that now. We're trying to reallocate our funds in that way, in some ways, but in the way that we train. But I would hire a huge creative team, or at least a creative team that was very savvy, and I would create much more micro learnings and I would do a lot more interactive training where I could either go to like our consultants, they work in different client sites, where we could go to, their client site conference room and facilitate a training over lunch or, not necessarily call them back to the mothership, but go to them. I would love to do more of that. So that's what I would do if I had 10 times my budget.
That's great. That would really add a lot of value. And also getting creative and hiring professionals and actors and video producers and all of that. That just spans the number of folks that you can work with, which gives us more creativity as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So let me finish off here with just a couple last questions. I would love to know what your favorite source is for industry news and information.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think I'm a product of my generation. So, my parents, their generation, they receive their news from like two or three sources, right? And growing up, it was listening to Walter Cronkite, and so it's like the one voice of truth, right? And so as time has gone on, and we live in, like you described earlier, this more ambiguous world, but also a world that has more input, more sources of data. I go everywhere. I listen to and I read and I absorb as much as I can, and some of that is because I'm a product of the information age, right? And some of that is that, but also some of it is my academic background. Like I want to hear what multiple voices are saying. I want to dig into primary source data. So all of that to say, all of that preamble to say, at a macro level, I read Gallup, I read McKinsey, I read Deloitte, I read just about anybody who is doing macro research, right, across industries, globally, et cetera. So I'll read them. In terms of primary source research, I love Adam Grant, the thought leader, author, and professor at Wharton Business School out of UPenn, um, or out of Penn. He is just brilliant, and he does a great job of when he tweets. So I'm on Twitter or X. He'll link to the academic article. So now you have an opportunity to go to the primary source. What is he referencing? So I really like him for that, and I try to get into academic spaces and dig into things like JSTOR and whatever to find like research for organizational psychology and things like that. Training Magazine, I really appreciate them. Give them a shout out. I've really benefited from some of the articles that the practitioners have written there. And then I'd say finally, just following people on LinkedIn or Twitter, and just listening to what people are experiencing. So not just the macro research, not just that big picture stuff, not just stuff that's happening through a university, program of developing like studies, but also boots on the ground, right? What are people experiencing? Because there's a lot of value to that. Sometimes we dismiss our own experience as knowledge, right? But there's a lot of value to one's experience. And so I try to hear what people are experiencing within their companies, within different industries, not just consulting.
Well, that's amazing. You are all over the gamut with the resources, which is wonderful. So it's no surprise that you're in the top 100 L&D leaders because
Thanks.
you
Yeah.
really
I
have your
love to
finger on the
learn.
pulse,
I love to learn.
and that's evident.
And here's the point too, like it's not about me. And I just want to make that really, really clear. This isn't about, like, yes, it's an honor to be in the top 100 for Uncon. It's an honor. Our team wins awards here locally in DFW. That's great. But my why is helping people flourish in who they are and what they do. And that's why I am a sponge for research. That's why I share research with my team, and we read books together, and I'm just constantly trying to absorb. Is I want to help. I want to plant seeds. I want to see people grow. And so that's why I do it. And I appreciate the encouragement. I appreciate what you're saying. And I just want to make that abundantly clear. I'm not in it for me. I'm in it to help others grow and flourish.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate that, and we'll take as much as we can get from people like you because it's definitely inspiring and educational. So you mentioned books. So what is the one book that everyone wanting to move into L&D leadership should read, in your opinion?
Yes, I've got it right here. I just finished reading it, right? The Trusted Learning Advisor by Keith Keating, Dr. Keith Keating. Um, the Trusted Learning Advisor is a fantastic book. Dr. Keating is brilliant. And not only is he brilliant, he's so kind. I've had the chance to interact with him just a little bit in a book club for this book. And he's just been such a helpful human being and helpful leader. This book walks one through, how do you develop trust at your organization? How do you partner with the leaders of your organization? How do you make the case for L&D providing ROI, right? How do you become not just an order taker, and we're all order takers, right? We're all servants to the business. We want that. That's most of us got into, talent development because we want to serve others, right? And how can you become a trusted learning advisor? How can you do both? And the consultant in me loves this idea of consultative L&D, so that you're listening. So if someone comes to you with a problem, so Tracy D, you come to me and you say, "Hey, listen, we want to roll out this mobile app, and we understand that our company is large, and we have a lot of people who are near retirement, and they may not be really fired up about learning something new, and they may not be fired up about downloading another mobile app. on their phone. So what do we do? I'm thinking that we need a training to make sure that they adopt this. So a trusted learning advisor stops and leans back and takes a breath and listens and asks questions. Okay, so tell me more about that, Tracy D. Tell me more about what you're looking for here. What are the gaps that you're seeing? And then you have this like interplay of using coaching skills, like we talked about earlier. You're asking questions, you're actively listening, understanding what the needs are in the environment, understanding what the primary business drivers are, understanding what the end user, what the learner needs, right? Putting all that together and then having a conversation, do you even need this training, right? Is it a training that you need? Is it something else, right? And that's the trusted learning advisor goes through that. This book goes through how can you do that? How can you build on being someone who is like consultative in the way that you do L&D? And so for me, it just is the perfect marriage between my consulting background, which I did for 3.5 years, and L&D. And I think that's the way forward as well. He does a great job of, you talked earlier about like where do we see the future? Like I think part of that too is we've got to have more L&D, and Dr. Keating makes this point. This is not an original thought. This is his really. We've got to have more L&D folks who know how to be consultative, who know how to build those relationships, but also talk ROI and talk about, is this really a training need or is this something else? So I'm gushing about this book because this has stayed by my computer desk, on my desk next to my computer for the past like 3.5 months.
Oh, that's wonderful. I can't wait to read it because I have seen in over the years how L&D has had gets a bigger seat at the table, is learning how to have to speak ROI, speak the business, but we all need more of that. And so this will be perfect for folks to learn how to bring that and learn those tasks and those skills.
Right, right. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you, John, for joining us today. I really appreciate you being on our show today. This has
Thank
been
you.
fun
It's such
learning
a
from you
pleasure.
and yeah, talking with you and we want to express our sincere thanks. And as a gift to you for being on our show, we're going to plant 5 trees in your name. Our charity, yes, we have a charity at Training Pros who is planting trees around the world, and we've planted over 3,500 trees to date. So we'll plant 5 trees in your name and send you a certificate showing you where they're planted so that you know what part of the country. And it's just our way of letting you know how much we appreciate you.
That's beautiful. What a gift. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that is this episode of Learning Leaders Spotlight.